And it looks like we are in. So, good afternoon, people of YouTube and of the podcast sphere. Welcome to Spectator Diff, the esports podcast by the absolutely least paid spectators in the Overwatch League. My name is Brad. Matt is over in that box over there as usual, and we have started this podcast to talk about professional Overwatch because we have a lot of opinions, and gosh darn it, someone needs to hear them. We're back after a 2-week hiatus for the grand finals, and normally we are here every week around this time, 12:30 Eastern, Central, Pacific, sometimes on Tuesdays, to discuss what's happening in Overwatch esports. You can catch our live stream here while we are recording the podcast, and you can also catch us wherever you consume your podcast audio of choice. We can see our VODs on Spotify. So before we get into all of this, do us a favor, leave this video a like. If you're brand new here, consider subscribing to the channel. Helps us out a lot. And yeah, shtick is we do some headlines, we recap a game of the week, and hit you with some predictions and get out of here. But since we have just finished the grand finals, we are going to talk about primarily the grand finals. But first, headlines. Matt, take us away.
Yeah, so we got some headlines this week. Thing number one, last week, the week that we took off because playoffs were happening, and by we I mean Overwatch 2, was the second most viewed category on Twitch. The only thing viewed more than Overwatch 2 was the just chatting category, which is, you know, Twitch code for everything else. So we beat Dota 2 and League of Legends. Probably had something to do with all the drops, but like, hey, I think Overwatch is back.
Nah, dead game.
Overwatch is a live game, man.
Dead game. Dead game, fake news. Nobody plays this shit. What are you talking about?
Well, for those of you who are still playing, Ramatra Main's Rise Up, the next hero, is set to launch in early December. Clearly, I don't care that much about talking about Twitch numbers. Brad, I do want to talk about this new hero. Your initial thoughts on the tank coming December 6th, please.
I'm gonna buy that bust. I'm 100% buying the bust. No, seriously. Ramatra looks cool as hell. Looks so cool. I love the idea of a transforming tank. I am also very, very excited for the fact that this is now the second full hero designed with 5v5 in mind. And we know how great Kiriko is. You know, obviously Sojourn and Junker Queen, like, brand new to the game as well, but neither was designed with the idea of the 5v5 playstyle. So I'm very, very excited to see what this tank offers to the fold. Initial impressions, like thoughts of the kit that have leaked and things like that, some of the things that the devs have sort of done in their Q&A on Reddit and whatnot, all look very, very promising. So again, like everything else, I know that as we get more details over the next 2-3 weeks, it's gonna shift the tone of the conversation to, oh, it's gonna be broken, wah. But we just gotta wait and see at this point. It's gonna be, I'm really excited. I'm just glad to have more content, to be honest with you. Fill out that tank roster, fill out that support roster. Let's go. Give me more. Give me
fuel, give me fire, give me that which I desire. I do think that the one leak that I've read that is the most interesting to me is one of his abilities seems to be like a large AoE slow. And at least one of the leaks that I've read so far seems to confirm that large slow grounds flying heroes.
Ooh, I love it. I want it.
Yeah.
I am so sick of dealing with Pharah. I am so tired of Pharah.
I am also exhausted of Pharah.
Oh my god, give me it.
I'm super into the idea of being able to ground flyers. I think that'll be a lot of fun. And yeah, Ramatra launches with Season 2 on December 6th. You know, Battle Pass, gonna have to pay for it or play to level 6 million or whatever you get to unlock
55,
the hero.
folks. It's just 55. Everybody breathe. God damn.
Is it just 50? I thought it was 80. I honestly haven't looked.
It's 55, and I'm gonna tell you this. I got to 55 in 2 weeks.
I'm far past there.
Now, granted, like I played probably a little bit more than the average player, but I have things to do in my life these days, so I didn't get to play nearly as much as I wanted to. So for someone who plays the game at a hobby level, as like their end of the day, like I have my free time, this is what I'm gonna do with it. 55 is attainable in 2 weeks. Do I think it's like a little bit on the long side? Yeah, but it is absolutely doable. You're talking about in time to play ranked with the new hero if you really that's what you're going for. So
yeah, and I mean I can clear most of my dailies in like 3 games.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So like
that's like the average.
And clearing all of your dailies usually gets you like a level and a half to 2 levels on the battle pass.
I mean,
so
like look at it put it this way, like I've had days that I've been able to play more and days I've only been able to play a little bit or not at all. So like I haven't even played every single day since the game launched. And as of tonight, I will have completed my first rotation through the battle pass. So like,
yeah,
and that's 28 days to go until the next season. So I would say for the slightly above average player, if you really want to make this game free, it's more than doable.
Yeah, I agree. It does not seem terrible. I think the battle pass grind is really reasonable, honestly. I never feel like I'm just playing the game to gain levels. I feel like I'm gaining levels quickly. I will say the coin grind feels miserable. The coin grind is a little slow, and I think that needs to be changed. I have another headline about that we'll get to in a couple of minutes. But as far as the battle pass grind goes, doesn't feel that bad. You do have 28 days before the next one launches, but be aware, Season 1 ends officially, and Season 2 begins on December 6th.
That's fast. Feels so fast.
Yeah.
It feels like just yesterday that we started this already.
I know, right? It's gone so quickly. Like when they announced Ramatra at Grand Finals, I was like, we really getting another new hero?
Yeah.
And I forget that the 2+ years between Echo and Sojourn were not standard protocol.
I mean, we're about to go into double time with it too. Like after Ramatra launches, it's going to be 2 seasons before we get the next one. So maybe that'll even out. But even more than that, even like I guess it'd be a 4-month break between heroes.
6 months, like about 6. Yeah.
You think? Yeah. All right. Like, still, we'll find out. We'll see.
Yeah. Well, speaking of December 6th, it will not only bring the launch of Ramatra, but also likely a new DPS passive, or some sort of changes to the DPS passive. Some of the Overwatch devs did an AMA via Twitter on October 28th. One of the questions asked was, are you considering to look at the DPS passive due to how the speed boosts that get provided from it benefit certain heroes like flankers a lot more than other DPS? Also, would you rebalance heroes like Genji if the DPS passive does get changed? The answer from Alec Dawson was yes. DPS passive is at the top for changes in Season 2, for reasons you bring up, but also sentiment that it is hard to aim with on certain heroes. We want to see how heroes like Genji perform with the passive changes first, then evaluate from there. Open to readjusting, though. So, I don't know what the new passive will be, but they changed it.
They're just gonna have such a hard time with this. This DPS passive thing is gonna curse them for so long. I don't know what the solution is. Honestly, I think their better bet would be to do like a hit scan passive and like a flanker passive, and split the difference between the category, because quite honestly, they're gonna have a hard time finding a passive that is beneficial to the entire DPS roster simultaneously without being completely busted. Obviously, this whole, unless you're listening to TikTok, which no one should listen to TikTok. Holy crap, the Overwatch takes on TikTok are garbage. Oh my goodness, I didn't think it could be that bad. But that's how you know the game is back. But that's a whole other dissertation.
Sure is.
Like, the DPS passive in its current form is not broken. It's just kind of like underwhelming, especially if you're a hit scan player. Like, Widow doesn't get much of a benefit from it. Ashe does suffer. I will say it's really, really hard to aim with Ashe if you're popping off, because the tempo of your movement gets so freaking wonky that it's just really hard to do anything with. And, you know, I have not seen... I wouldn't say anything that has happened to me with Genji receiving that passive. I wouldn't call it broken. I just think that, like, at this point, they just need to full on reevaluate. There's no, like, I don't know what the answer is for this, but it's gonna be a problem for multiple seasons, I think.
So I don't have TikTok, and I don't know the takes on Overwatch TikTok, but can I tell you, I think I've solved the DPS passive problem.
All right, let me hear it.
I think I know what the DPS passive should be, right? So what's the idea of a passive? The concept of a passive is to help your role do your role better. Tank passive, less knockback, easier to tank. Great.
Okay.
Support passive, you heal yourself. You do more healing because you heal yourself. Great. Easy. Love it. So, what do damage players do? They do damage. How can we make damage players do more damage? I think the new damage passive should be that damage heroes get a 1.1 multiplier to body shots on tanks.
On tanks specifically?
Well, I would go everybody, to be honest, but I think when you apply that to supports, it gets scary.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say, if you do that right now, you're just gonna, those support queues are gonna be
abysmal.
Like, you're not even gonna be in a queue. You're gonna be in the menu, and you're gonna get drafted into a support game. That's what's gonna happen.
Yeah, so like I go back and forth between, should it just be on tank? Should it just be on damage? Should it be on tanks and damage? Is it worth it to make a passive that some role is immune to? I do think, honestly, I think it would be fun if you got that multiplier specifically against other damage heroes, right? So it gives...
I could see it against damage. I think with doing it outside of the damage role itself, I think you're gonna run the risk of like deleting tanks in the 6v6 fashion or just murdering your support players. Like,
yeah, I think it would be cool to put it on damage because it encourages your DPS heroes to focus other damage heroes as opposed to just diving supports. And I don't think it needs to be a lot, you know, it's nobody's winning the game because supports heal themselves, right? Nobody's winning the games because tanks have less knockback. So you don't want to buff damage so high that like power creep gets insane and suddenly it's all about your DPS. Like a 1.1 multiplier is relatively negligible, but is still a passive. And I do think, like, you know, however you want to apply it, I think a small multiplier to something other than headshots, like I kind of got this idea off of Kiriko getting a 3x multiplier on headshot. Like, why can't you apply that multiplier in a different way? Right? So like add a little extra damage to DPS, but again, a little extra damage, not a lot extra damage, you know?
Yeah. I could see that. That's definitely one way to look at it. I still think that we could revisit the speed boost idea, the just like across the board speed boost idea from the original beta. I don't know. There's something there as well. Like I said, it's one of those things where it's just hard to, because to your 1.1 multiplier point, think about the body shot bandit widows.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's a very fine break point where that starts to become oppressive.
So let's now I'm invested. If I do Overwatch 2 Widow, I gotta look at Widow's numbers because I don't remember them off the top of my head. Abilities. Okay, so at 100% power, the Widow's gun does 120 damage
to the body.
So yeah. At as long as you're not outside of 100 meters, like the fall off range. So 120 with a 1.1 multiplier is only 132. So like it's there. I'm not going to argue with you. I don't disagree that the numbers get scary at some point. But like
it's just one of the
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean I'm not, like I said, it's not a bad idea. I'm thinking pragmatically in terms of like, because Overwatch is a game entirely about breakpoints, right? Mm-hmm. And because there's so much in the way of ability stacking that goes on across the board, when you start to mess with the specific damage numbers themselves, those breakpoints become a very, very fine line at certain points. So like there's definitely validity to the idea, and I wouldn't be surprised if the specific number had to be something like 1.08 or something, because of after ability stacking, it's like preventing an instant one shot on multiple things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's ultimately what it comes down to, because when we talk about the game balance in and of itself and how it's usually done from the top down, obviously like the largest chunk of the community can't get the full value out of most of the things that happen. But if you don't acknowledge the breakpoints when it comes to the balancing, that top handful of percent is just unplayable at a point.
Yeah, for sure.
It's the it's the paradox of Overwatch and the Overwatch balancing.
It sure is. And you know, like the big conversation with Sojourn that the devs have had in a lot of these AMAs with people asking for Sojourn nerfs has been like, Sojourn's really oppressive at high levels, but only at high levels. You know, like down below gold, you're not getting that same sort of impact from Sojourn. And I think it's that same when you try and come up with a passive, like how do you create something that doesn't really separate high levels from low levels?
Right. And that's ultimately why I think the answer lies in like a group of passives within the DPS role, because there's so much diversity going on down there that they've kind of, again, boxed themselves into a corner with what can happen. You know, theoretically, you could have a passive that affects specifically the flying heroes. You could have a passive that specifically affects the flankers, the passive that specifically affects the ranged units. And if you can customize it like within categories like that, at that point, you have more room to play, and it's less likely to just break the role. And I understand from the dev standpoint, that's probably fucking hard to do.
Yeah.
But like, with a roster as big as you have in Overwatch 2, that may be the only that may be the only solution, because I don't think a blanket solution is gonna do it the whole way here.
What if, okay, I've got one other idea that I just kind of brainstormed while we were sitting here talking about breakpoints, and I'm thinking of like, how do you get away from numbers? Like, how do you get away from a passive that changes the numbers? What if DPS heroes got a speed boost out of spawn on respawn?
That's got some potential to it. Like, if like a 5 second ish, something like that, plus or minus. You know, basically the time it takes to get from spawn to point, not even, maybe like halfway. That might have some potential to it. I don't hate that at all. That's certainly, that has some great implications. Or subsequently, like the respawn timer goes down or something,
it'd be
like
shorter.
Yeah, that has, I think there's some potential there, absolutely. You know, I think with the passive, the biggest thing needs to be it doesn't affect specifically the damage numbers, but like I also don't hate like the reload off of elimination, the reload boost off of that.
Yeah,
like,
I like that a lot,
you know,
actually,
because that helps you when re-engaging. I think there's definitely benefit there. It sounds small, but it does buff the damage without specifically touching the numbers. So
Yeah.
there's a bunch of different things they could do. I just think it's not gonna be a blanket solution to really solve the problems that they're having.
Yeah, I agree. Well, hey, let's move on. I've got a couple more headlines. Sure. Thing number one, I dubbed Grand Finals the Butterfinger Bowl because we saw Butterfinger
crudely
all over the place.
Crudely plastered on random buildings. Oh, it was so funny.
Crudely plastered.
Oh, it was so funny.
And I gotta say, like, for Overwatch League, I think that this is a great idea. I think that there's a lot of potential to bring new money into the league through in-game advertisement like that. God, if they push it to live, I'm quitting the game. Do not push advertisements on me to live. And if you do, keyframe them correctly. Jesus Christ, you guys. Like, some of those Butterfinger logos were bad.
They were.
But all those things said, if you didn't know, which I did not, you can get free stuff by buying Butterfingers. If you buy real life Butterfingers, either a bag of Butterfingers, and I'm reading from an article, I don't know how big a bag has to be, but a bag or 2 chocolate bars, 2 bars of eligible chocolate, entitles you to in-game rewards. In-game rewards, Brad. Isn't that fun for buying Butterfingers?
That is fun for buying Butterfingers. That's also... I have a bodega. Like, I can see it. I'm looking at the bodega right now. Like, I can see it.
Well, I'll tell you this. So each qualifying purchase has to be either 1 bag or 2 bars of eligible chocolate. Your first qualifying purchase gets you a Sojourn Power Slide spray. Your second qualifying purchase gets you a Junker Queen Golden Crown spray. And your third qualifying purchase gets you a Jaren Man icon. I don't know who Jaren Man is.
I don't know.
But there you go. Buy Butterfingers. Get free stuff.
Wow.
We're all 4 Butterfingers away from 2 free skins. Free sprays, not skins.
I will say, if they were to like plaster the logos into the live game, I wouldn't be upset about it because there's ways to do it effectively, and I would hope at that point the money is being spent to actually make it look good. And if they're getting their corporate sponsors back, I'm honestly, I'm less mad about it. I'm less mad about it because this game needs all of the help it can get to make up for the last couple of years. So,
yeah, it certainly does.
Big Microsoft, get on it. Come on. Make it happen.
Well, talking about ActiBliz getting money, my last headline before we get to just rant for a minute, because this ends with a rant, but my last headline is, people have talked a lot about cosmetic prices in Overwatch 2. Turns out Overwatch 2 cosmetics cheaper in real life than in the game. So
you talking about that Pachimari, like little... Yeah.
I sure am talking about the Pachimari weapon charm. So you can go to the Blizzard store right now and you can buy in real life a Pachimari keychain, which is the same as the Pachimari weapon charm. That keychain is $5. The Pachimari weapon charm in game, $7. Save $2. Get it in real life.
So obviously this is a huge oversight. I will say it's probably in part because they are 2 different teams. Whoever's doing the merchandise versus whoever's doing the in-game monetization, probably 2 entirely separate teams that my guess is don't have a lot of communication back and forth between one another. That being said, you would think that it would have crossed someone's desk at some point to maybe check on that, because gamers will find it.
We will.
Seagull found it in like an hour. Like,
yeah. I think this is the best argument so far to in-game cosmetics are too expensive.
Yes.
Which I'll be honest, I don't disagree with. I get it. Blizzard needs to make money. It's a free-to-play game. I'm not saying cosmetics need to be free. We get it. Let's move past that. I think that ticket prices are a little high for cosmetics in Overwatch 2 right now. And if there's one thing that proves it, it's that you can buy the cosmetics in real life for less real life money.
Yeah.
That's a problem.
That is a problem. And like, look, obviously people, you got to speak up. That's how change gets, you know, especially like this week, especially, it's an important lesson for life that, you know, speak up if you want change to happen. So, you know, I absolutely do not expect Blizzard to stick to their guns on these prices. Clearly they're willing to negotiate a little bit. Now you can unbundle the cosmetics. Like, that is a thing that we're getting. You're able to buy individual parts of bundles now. The prices are still high, but if you just want the skin and don't want to pay $26 for like 5 different things, you can just buy the one thing. So that's already a step in the right direction. The next step is going to be for them to reduce prices, which, you know, I don't know if it's going to be in their best interest to do, because clearly all of the streamers are buying the shit. All of the streamers I've seen this past couple of weeks have been giving away bundles and shit. So, like, transactions are being made, and the question remains, are enough transactions being made at the current price point to incentivize them to lower? The number has to be too low on the price point to say, like, we need to lower these prices before, so that we can actually make money off of this. It's just, you know, that's the point that it has to get to. So rather than everybody just complain, just don't buy the damn thing.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's cool. It might be really cool, but like, if you're really hell-bent on saying this is too expensive, just don't buy it. And eventually they will have to lower the price. Most of these cosmetics will eventually come back around anyway, because the store is an ever-rotating entity now. So,
right.
You know, complain by like, absolutely complain, voice your opinion on it, because like, yeah, the prices are a little ridiculous. But like, the biggest thing you can do is just not buy the shit.
Right. I do think the prices are ridiculous. The thing that I would like to see Blizzard change in game right now is less the actual prices, and I just want to see the coin gain get a little higher.
That could be, yeah.
Yeah, I think that would go a long way. Like right now, I mean, the coin grind is slow. And some of those weekly challenges, like, it is tough to get all 11 weekly challenges every week as a casual player.
I think the biggest part for me that I don't like with it is the requirement for specific game modes. Because I have to win 7 games in the arcade. That challenge specifically, get rid of that, because it's I don't even want to play 7 games in the arcade. Trying to win them is really, really hard, because nobody is trying to win an arcade. Literally no one is trying to win an arcade. So if you want to play 7 games, fine. Win? No.
Yeah. The one that's really been driving me the most insane is the ever-present weekly challenge of win 10 games queued as 2 different roles when there's no way to track how many wins you've gotten.
I think
that's some shit.
That they just need to update the UI on. They need to just fix the UI for that, so that you know what you're like. Maybe put a counter in the bar that says number of games per role. Don't keep me guessing, because that's the only way. Like, no, just fix the UI and that challenge is fine.
Yeah, so I hope that things change. I think that over time they will. It's early. Brad said it very well. If you're upset about this, just stop giving Blizzard your money, and they will learn eventually. I promise. All right, my last headline, and we have about 2 minutes before it's time to move on to playoff recap. So it's not going to be a long rant, but I have a rant.
Okay.
Gamerrant.com. I just closed my video window. Okay, good. I'm still on the call. I thought for a second that I had exited the call. Anyway, Gamerrant, the website, posted an article 2 days ago, and I got a news notification for it this morning. And the headline of that article is Overwatch 2 needs to ban the word diff. Clearly, I, as one of the co-hosts of a podcast called Spectator Diff, took this shit personally. the argument made in this article is that diff is a word that exists nothing more than, or for nothing more than to be toxic. Gamer Rant wants diff in the same category as GG Easy. I think that's dumb. And I'm just gonna say it. I think it's dumb. I think there is so much value to Blizzard and Actiblizzard and Microsoft and all these fucking Silicon Valley nerds. There's a ton of value to these idiots figuring out ways to cut back toxicity in their game, censoring chat, banning people from voice, stopping people from being racist and sexist and misogynistic and all the things. But diff is not toxic. You're bad at playing support. That's your fault, not mine. Done.
Wow, I thought I was gonna be the one to be harsh on this. God damn, dog.
It's just like, it's diff. It's not a bad word. Oh my God. Like,
it's that old John Mulaney bit. If there's a word and another word and you won't even say one of them, that's the worst word.
That's what I'm saying, man. Like, okay, I think it's a little silly that they censor GG Easy.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of goofy. But like, whatever. But diff, I mean, come on. Like, if we lose a game because you had 3k healing and the other team combined had 27k healing, it's a support diff and you're bad. And I should be allowed to tell you that you're bad.
That's fair.
And we lost because it's your fault.
I just like, okay. It's always these game journalism articles that are like, you know, they're trying to combat every inch of toxicity, and it's just not realistic. It's not realistic. Look, the amount of times it's especially been in the low rank grind, because that reset hit me fucking hard. But like, it's my fault for not playing ranked since 2020. But like trying to like grinding out of those low ranks, the amount of just angry people, the amount of angry people that are just angry to be angry. Like I've now completely, like, I've turned off text chat because nothing good ever comes from it in the low ranks. The only useful discourse ever comes from team chat, and like. If you're not in voice chat, it's basically GG go next, because voice chat is a win condition now. Like, that is a win condition at low ranks. I hate to break it to everybody. Be in chat, win more games. Period. But like, the game's already recording every voice conversation, and the machine learning AI is apparently learning fucking context. So if you get reported and this AI, which is apparently very, very good at its job now, like, and it determines that, hey, you were being an asshole and you're banned now. They've already got a lot working for it. They already got a lot, and honestly, if it's getting the racist, misogynistic, bigoted kids out of the game, like, great. I call that an absolute win. That is an absolute win. You cannot police every little ounce of everything, and you're asking a machine learning AI to learn the context of now an entirely other phrase, which xdiff has 8 million contexts of its own. You look at the streamers that play this game that are just like flaming their friends across the team for the hell of it. Like, that's you're asking for the machine learning to now learn the context of when they're just being shitty to each other, not being toxic. Like,
yeah, and like, there's a big difference between, like, you know, me saying support diff, and okay, I'll put my cards on the table. Part of the reason I don't want him to ban diff is because diff is an easy word to type on a console keyboard, like a very easy word. So when I get angry when I'm playing on console, it's a word I can use, and I don't want him to ban it. But I will say, like, there's a big difference between somebody throwing slurs around and somebody saying support diff. Like, a big difference.
Oh,
and the difference
absolutely.
there is, like, one of those things encourages people not to play games. The other one encourages people to turn off the freaking text chat. If the word diff offends you, turn off the text chat or play a new game.
Yes.
Done. I'm done. I don't want to talk about this anymore, but I'm done.
Yeah, if you're so like I said, if you're so worried about this showing up in text chat, just turn off text chat. Like, I did it for my own sanity because I'm competitive and I just don't want to. I don't want some idiot tilting me by saying something stupid. I would rather focus on my gameplay and, like, if I realize that we're losing, figure out how I'm gonna be better than this team. Like, that's what I wanted. So I've turned that off and I'm just in voice chat. Like, that's literally all it, like, it's a blanket solution that solves everything. And, like, I don't know, man. I swear to God, some of these game journalists just get so butthurt about the silliest shit. It's just so dumb. It's so dumb. I'm all about cutting back on toxicity, but like, come on.
Yeah.
Thicken your skin a little bit.
I would say that this is an article that was likely written to get hate clicks, and I hate clicked it, so they got me.
Womp womp.
And that's all I've got for headlines. That's it. We're done. It's time to move on to playoffs. Let's talk about playoffs.
Let's talk about playoffs.
You're talking about playoffs? Yeah, we're talking about playoffs. So, the Dallas Fuel and the San Francisco Shock took it all the way to 7 maps, but the grand finals victory was claimed by those who burn blue as the Dallas Fuel finally get their franchise first grand finals win. Before we get into what happened during the tournament, I want to take a moment to reflect on our rankings and preds from the last episode. Brad, just give me like an overarching rating, not on our preds, because our preds were silly as everyone's were. Give me like a 7 out of 10 rating on our power rankings we did last week.
These are our rankings, right?
Yep, the ones on the left are us, and the ones on the right are actual position.
Huh. You know, we did all right.
We didn't do too bad.
A 7, an out of 10 rating. We probably did like. I'll give us like a 6, because like.
Yeah.
I'll give us a 6. We actually. You know what? We did all right.
We really screwed up like 2 things.
Yeah.
And or I guess 4 teams, because 2 up, 2 down. We put Glads in Shanghai way too high. We put Outlaw and Spark way too low. Other than that, we did really well. So for those who didn't listen or watch last week's episode, we did power rankings, how we thought folks were going to do. I will say we put Glads on top of those power rankings, which was silly.
Boy, they really done pooped the bed, didn't they?
Sure did.
Wow.
They sure did.
Wow, did they not show up for this?
What I think is cool is that we put Spitfire in at number 5, Dynasty in at number 6, and Florida Mayhem in at number 7. And in 5th place at the end of the tournament was the London Spitfire. 6th place was the Seoul Dynasty, and 7 was the Florida Mayhem. So we nailed 3 of 12. We got 100% correct, which is pretty cool.
There you have it, Spectator Diff fans. This is the content that you show up for. We are so good. We are so good at predictions that we got 3 out of 12. Exactly.
We are 33%
right.
good.
We are. Yes.
So that's looking at our rankings. I do think that we did pretty well overall. We aligned with what basically everybody else in the community was saying, with the exception of we put Spark last. And I guess, okay.
I'm so mad at the Spark.
Had we known how hard a Sojourn meta they were going to be playing in grand finals, maybe we would have given more credit to Shy popping off. Obviously, we didn't know exactly what the meta and the patch was going to look like. We didn't know Reaper Sojourn was going to be the DPS run, which was something that just like fit Shy and Alpha Yi really well, and Pineapple, I guess. So maybe we would have put Spark higher, but going into playoffs, I don't feel bad about putting Spark at the bottom of these preds.
God, no. Just like, look at it in the sense of gambling. You're talking about smart money. Like, if you're betting exclusively on Shy, even in a Sojourn meta, you're hedging a lot of bets. A lot of bets. Like, no. The smart money was never on Spark to begin with.
So with that in mind, now that we've had that little conversation, like I said, our bracket was booned, as everybody's was. But I want to know from you, for your own personal bracket, because I know we both filled out our own brackets outside of what we did on the show last week, what was the first game that just ruined it all for you?
Shanghai
Spark.
You were
like, it's over.
Shanghai Spark,
Shanghai
and then
Spark?
everything went tits up. Like literally the second that Shanghai got shut out, what was it? It was 3-0. Like
Yep.
It wasn't even close. Like the second that happened, everything went tits up from there, because then everybody picked everybody else that I didn't predict, and then just all chaos. Everything was chaos. You couldn't have picked that bracket if you threw darts at a board. Jesus.
Yep. Yeah, mine was similar. Mine was just the game before. Mine was San Francisco, or not San Francisco Gladiators. It was I wrote it down. Winners round 2, London versus Gladiators. When London beat LA 3-1, I was like, well, that's it for me, everybody. Pack it up and go home. I looked pretty okay through the first round. The only game I missed in the first round was Spark Dragons. I did not have Dragons going very far at all, so it wasn't terrible, but I did have LA winning it all, and when they lost in their first game, it was bad news for me. So let's talk about what did happen in the playoffs this weekend, or this last week. I've got some bullet points here. We can run through them. If you got other stuff you want to talk about it, I'm just here to reminisce about playoffs. Thing number one, I kind of had these chronologically. The Hangzhou Spark beat the Shanghai Dragons on day one, and they ride that momentum all the way to losers semi. So, Brad, talk to me about that. I know you said it was what just dunked your bracket in a bucket of gasoline.
I don't have too much to say about this, though, because at the end of the day, there was just one deciding factor, and it was blatantly obvious. It was the reliance on Shy to just kill everyone. You know, that you could see exactly where things fell apart for the Spark, and it was any time that the opposing team was able to focus him down and prevent him from getting value. At the end of the day, their entire bracket run rested on Shy's shoulders. You know, Gujue did all right. He held his own all right in the Winston department, but so far as to, you know, guide sightlines enough for Shy to get value. Outside of that, there's nothing about what I watched them do that impressed me. You know, they should be proud of their run, that it got them to where it did. But again, you know, the lack of full team input is what stopped them in their tracks. And I'll get more on that point with other teams as well, but that's basically the takeaway.
Yeah, I think there's certainly been enough said this season about, you know, like the San Francisco Shock are only successful if Proper is allowed to pop off. And I've certainly said that myself, but that idea was, let me start that over. That idea has never been more evident than it was in Shy's performance and the Sparks performance in playoffs. Like,
yes.
If Shy was not enabled, the Spark lost.
Yep.
Period. So moving on, talking about losers, we had 4 teams that didn't win a single game in the playoffs.
Jeez.
Philly, Shanghai, Atlanta, and Toronto all left Anaheim winless. I'm curious, Brad, if any of those surprise you, what surprises you the most? What are your thoughts on that spread?
Atlanta. Atlanta is the one that stands out, because I had low expectations for Atlanta even in my predictions, but I didn't expect it to be that low. I had them winning a couple of games, I think, when everything was all said and done. I had them beating the Spark at one point. And, you know, obviously, I'm pretty sure Atlanta played the Spark at some point during this tournament in the lower bracket, right?
So Atlanta only played the Florida Mayhem.
They only played the Mayhem.
Florida Mayhem
it was
twice.
Yeah, it was a rematch situation too. Yeah, I had Atlanta like winning a couple of games. I didn't expect them to get completely shut out. It's to be honest, it's the most surprising. I didn't think Toronto looked great going into this. Shanghai, I guess, is also pretty surprising because everybody was pretty high on them. Actually, I'll amend that. Shanghai is the biggest surprise. But Philly, Toronto, not so much. Everyone kind of like looks at Philly as having like playoff potential because they always show up, but not even here. Like it's. And part of it has to do with the meta. Part of it has to do with the meta across the board with all of this. It's weird that this didn't suit Shanghai better. That's given everything that we know about how this all played out and what the state of the game was going into this, Shanghai should have performed substantially better than they did. As it should be said, Atlanta as well probably should have performed better than they did, all things considered.
Yeah, I was not super high on Atlanta coming into this tournament, and I was not super surprised that they didn't look great. Atlanta as a whole all season has been pretty underwhelming to me, and I was really worried coming into playoffs of what Atlanta's support line was going to do. I didn't have a lot of concern about damage, but like, OG and Ultraviolet are fine, but which one of them do you put on Kiriko and how much trust do you give that person? And then you have Vigilante, who has had some games that have looked really good, but I would say has not played enough this season to know, what his real potential is. So I didn't have super high hopes for Atlanta. One of my biggest surprises was Toronto. I expected Toronto to do better. I thought Hisu was going to be a much bigger difference maker. I felt good about Chorong on Lucio. Like, I felt pretty good about Twilight on Kiriko. So I was kind of surprised that we didn't get more out of Toronto in this tournament.
Yeah.
As far as Shanghai goes, Shanghai always seems to be really hit or miss. I was very surprised that we didn't see more from them. Philly, not surprised at all. Philly really did seem like the 12th team that showed up to make the bracket even. So going on, one of the first big surprises of this tournament outside of Spark Shanghai was that the Shock lost to the Houston Outlaws 3-2, and the LA Gladiators lost to London 3-1 in their first games. Talk to me a little bit, Brad, about how you thought. Let's start with LA. How do you think LA performed as a whole in this tournament? And do you think that because they didn't play in playoffs or in play-ins, they came into playoffs too cold to compete against Houston, who had played a whole lot of Overwatch and was really on fire?
I'm going to start with your second point. No, I don't think they were too cold at all. I think, and this is going to kind of, this point that I'm going to make is going to bleed into multiple points in this conversation about other teams and the rest of the finals as a whole. There were two play styles that developed throughout the course of the playoffs. And it was an incredibly fast, incredibly aggressive, balls to the wall play style, and a much more subdued, patient play style. And one of those two play styles was extremely dominant and borderline unbeatable. And if you didn't adapt to that play style, you just didn't win. And that particular play style was the fast pace, balls to the wall, just everything, just, scorched earth is what I would equate that play style. And LA didn't do it. They never, the entire time in every game that they played, they were not fast enough. They were not decisive enough. They were not seizing every inch of space that they could possibly take. And this is something that they are capable of doing. But I will say I don't think that that particular play style is conducive to the rookies in the league, and especially not to rookie tank players. I think Reiner specifically struggled very, very heavily because he suffers from the same problems as some of the other tanks I'll talk about later. Like, he doesn't have the control of his space taking. he either goes too far or not far enough, and he cannot split the difference consistently to get the value for the rest of his team. And the meta that developed in this series of games was very reliant on team cohesion. The Winston player needed to grab sight lines, needed to control entire lanes effectively, and manage cooldowns like a madman. And I just don't think that Reiner was prepared for that. I don't think that the hive mind really existed with LA that needed to pull off the meta that existed. That was really the predominant meta in these finals. As for London, you know, I think London adapted as best they could. I think their limitations were sort of in a overall cohesion standpoint. I don't think that they are quite as coordinated as they need to be. I think all of the players themselves are very capable, but I just don't think the full-on team coordination is there to make everything happen. They certainly have all of the pieces. It's just a matter of putting them together to make it work. And this was not a meta where they could really do the London way and go something else and press Reinhardt to win. Like, you couldn't do that here. There's just not, it was not an option.
Yeah, I agree. Honestly, like, I'm very proud of the playoff run that London put together.
Absolutely.
Going 2-2 through the playoffs was huge. The teams they lost to were teams that went far. I mean, like, London's first loss was to Houston. Their second loss was to Hangzhou. So I think they played really, really well. I hope that we don't see London get hugely restructured before next season. I think if London keeps a lot of their roster, then they could be a real force to reckon with next year. I do think Hottie struggled. Hottie did as good as he could on Winston, and honestly, Hottie's Winston is better than Reiner's was, but not phenomenal. And I think that, like it was for London or for LA, was their limiting factor. I was a little bit surprised that we didn't see any Poco. I kind of thought we get some Poco action at some point.
I mean, he's an off-tank player. He doesn't do the Winston. He does not play the Winston. That's the thing. And you know, I think so. Sort of going back to this point where Shock lost to Houston in their first matchup, and then London won. London recognized very early on what needed to be done to move further. Okay, like I said, they never really fully formed they never got to the final form of what the meta needed to be, but they were more on track than I think the Shock were to start with. Which is why the Shock lost to Houston early on, because Houston surprised everybody, and to their credit, looked the closest to Dallas than anybody else in the tournament had up until they lost to the Shock in semis. Yeah, like I was stunned by how well Houston pulled it together. So like I think the adaptation of what this meta was the defining factor for most of the teams at the end of the day.
Yeah, I agree. So these two big losses set up what I predicted to be the grand finals to happen in losers round 2, and that was San Francisco versus LA. San Francisco won this game 3-1, and Brad, I want to hear your takes on this game. I have some takes that I think double down on some of the things that you were just talking about, but I'll let you lead. What were your thoughts on San Francisco, LA?
This was the start of when the switch was starting to flip for San Francisco. They hadn't quite gotten there yet. They were still playing a lot slower, and they hadn't really figured out what it was that they wanted to do, but you could start to see glimmers of where they were headed. And it was just a case of LA just didn't adapt. They did not adapt. They were clueless. I'm gonna say it. They were just absolutely clueless to how this meta needed to be played, and I don't really know why. You know, again, they had the tools. That I'm wondering what was going on with their coaching staff to see what was going on and try and figure it out. But I don't think they necessarily had. I don't think they have the kind of aggression. I don't think as a team they have the kind of aggression that they needed. And even, I don't even know if you could force that on them. I think this was just not a great outcome for the meta for them.
Yeah, I agree. My biggest problem with LA in this tournament was Reiner. I thought Reiner looked bad. Not like off, bad. And I've been kind of hard as a casual LA fan. I've been pretty hard on Reiner this season. He is a rookie, and there's nothing to say bad about that. It takes time to learn these sorts of things, but I think Reiner had a lot of confidence in himself, and that led him to some really sloppy plays.
Yeah,
and Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and when the Winston is the defining, we talk a lot about the Sojourns being the hard carry, but the Winston is the defining tool that allows the Sojourn to get the value, because the placement of those bubbles and the management of your aggression to basically to determine the sight lines is what makes and breaks the Sojourn play. Because I mean, to get really nerdy about it, you have to think about the number of sightlines that are being controlled by Winston's bubble. Healing is disrupted. The Sojourn's immediate railgun is disrupted. And that bubble does not break as quickly as you think it does. Watching it and playing it in real time, it feels like it goes down quickly, but there's a lot of in-game time that goes by trying to break that bubble. That's a lot of time that sightlines are down, and it forces rotations in certain ways to really control the flow of the fight. You are literally forcing healers and the hit scan to play around that sightline, and you are telling them where they are gonna be able to go and play.
Yeah, I'm 100%. Especially when it is largely Sojourn versus Sojourn, and you have two hit scan players with 100% rail charge posturing for somebody's head, and then suddenly one of them has a Winston bubble in the face. That's game over. I think talking about teams like Hangzhou, where their win is based on how good Shy plays, Guxue was great. I don't want to say that Guxue didn't play well. I think he did, but he certainly was not setting up the whole team for success the way Fearless was, which allowed, Shy to pop off, but allowed Sojourn players less on it than Shy to still be able to win those matchups because they had support of that Winston. And I agree. I mean, Mikey looked better in playoffs than Mikey has looked all year. Kaluge looked really good. I'm a big old fanboy of Space. I've said it before. I'll say it again. I think they should have put Space on all the tank roles this year and said, "You're playing Winston. Get used to it, nerd."
Yeah.
But even in this 3-1 victory, when it went to Circuit and Space came out to play Sigma, Kaluge just looked better. If San Francisco would have won, I would have put Kaluge as MVP of their playoff run. I think Kaluge did a lot for San Francisco. Obviously, Proper. Let's put Proper on a shelf where Proper belongs and talk about the rest of the team.
We're going to talk specifically about this in a little bit, because I do have thoughts regarding the overall, just the team as a whole. Because we're going to talk about it in a little bit. We can touch upon that, upon the Shock specifically more. But I agree with you with LA that they're in a weird position, right? Because they are in essence sort of in a rebuild phase of their own, because they need Reiner to step up to be the main tank role and also not play like a rookie. And Space, I don't know how much longer Space is going to be playing as a pro.
It can't be that much longer.
Yeah,
it just can't be.
So I mean, there's the argument to be made. Well, if you want to win the tournament, you gotta give yourself the best tools. But you're talking massive long game to think back in April that we need to groom Space to be in the main tank role for finals. It was a hard position to be in. The inconsistency of the game in the past 6 to 8 months has not been the best for determining that all on. So what are you going to do last minute? How are they going to predict that Winston was going to be the final meta?
Yeah.
You got to rely on your main tank player. It's partially on the coaching staff for not recognizing that they needed to be more aggressive as a whole, because in the roles that they do have veterans, their support line in particular, they have the tools to force that aggression out of Reiner. It might not be perfect, but you could look at towards sort of an end game situation like you did with Mikey, where he wasn't prime for the cause, but it could have built them a better playoff run than it did.
Mm-hmm. And I think the other thing just to say about LA is that, quite frankly, this meta did not suit their DPS well.
No.
Happy was great on Sojourn. Kevster's Reaper left a lot to be desired.
Yeah.
And I mean, Kevster's a hyper flex player. He's really good at it. He plays a lot of heroes at a really high level. But Reaper is not one that I would put in Kevster's hero pool. They did some silly shit switching Happy to Reaper and putting Kevster on Sojourn for a little while. Like, I think that this meta did not play for LA the way that they hoped that it would. I think they had a lot of the same problems in this meta that they had in Jotes. Just that ability to go in to win is not LA's playstyle.
And I just don't think they were ready for what this meta became, because I don't think anyone, I certainly didn't, but I don't think anyone would have predicted it to be as balls to the wall as it was at its highest point. I have never, and I mean this, it took me by surprise. I have never seen Overwatch played like this. It was to the point where if it had gone a notch further, that it was basically reckless gameplay. It was so blisteringly fast. I do not think LA was even the slightest bit prepared for that.
No, absolutely not. So let's move on here. I've got a couple more bullet points. Seoul Dynasty, who, I know people had a lot of faith going in. We put them relatively high.
Mm-hmm.
I think Smurf may have been one of the only other realistic arguments for MVP. People had a lot of faith in Seoul. They only beat the Florida Mayhem.
Mm-hmm.
They did lose to Dallas and San Francisco, so they played the grand finals teams early. Maybe if the bracket shapes out differently, things go differently. But what did you think of Seoul's performance this week, and were you as underwhelmed by it as I was?
I wouldn't call it underwhelmed necessarily, because I'm at the risk of repeating the same talking points we've been going over the past 20 minutes. They adapted to the meta enough to get them where they ended up, and not an inch further. They were, when they played Dallas, massively underwhelming, but that's because Dallas was terrifying through the entirety of the playoffs. And Seoul once again couldn't match that level. And there was a break point in the bracket where teams adapted to that speed or they just lost. And actually this game, the game versus Seoul and Shock was that break point roughly. Because that's where the final separation was made for the teams that progressed. So, they adapted to the point where it got them where it did, and they still weren't fast enough.
Yeah, man. I guess I shouldn't say Seoul as a whole was underwhelming. I wasn't underwhelmed by Smurf. I thought Iris and Vindame played great. Honestly, what I was the most underwhelmed by was Shanghai's DPS line. I think that Iris, Vindame, and Smurf were all right, go fast. We go fast. Let's go. And Prophet, Stalker, and Fitz, I think, struggled the most to make those adjustments. I will say my favorite game of this whole playoff series, taking grand finals out of it, was Seoul versus Shock. That game was fun to watch. The scoreboard does not look as close as the gameplay was.
Yeah.
It was a really good game. Kaluj put sit in the chat, and I lost my mind.
That game was insane. That game was insane.
It was crazy. Yeah, that was one of those that was one of those games where I remember just staring at my TV screen thinking, what is it going to take to slow Proper down? Can anything stop him? This man is unhinged.
You know, I was talking about like when the switch was flipping for Shock. This was the game where it had been fully flipped. From this game on, they blew my expectations out of the water. But you know, we'll talk more about that in a second.
Yeah. Next bullet point. We've talked about this a lot, but let's take our minute to just like break down the Hangzhou Sparks performance. Shy had his way with the bracket until Proper decided to do something about it. Brad, what are your thoughts on the Hangzhou Sparks performance in the sense of, okay, Gushui looked good, Shy looked good. What the hell else is going on with the Hangzhou Spark? Also, if you haven't pulled out the Hangzhou Sparks roster page recently to see just how many players are on that team, I recommend doing so.
For having the biggest roster in the league, I can't figure out why they couldn't put something more together than what they did. Look, they had a great bracket run. I don't have a lot of thoughts on the Spark. Their win condition was Shy, and when teams could shut him down, they got no value. They have a problem with cohesion and carry potential across the board, and simply relying on Shy clearly doesn't do it for them. Like they came into this tournament with a negative record from the prior stage. Like, if he can't get value, the team loses. That's just not a good strategy. They have a big frickin' roster. To me, this screams coaching diff. Like, if you are the head coach of this team and you can't put together a strategy that wins while having the biggest roster in the league, something is wrong. Something is wrong, and that is my full take on it. Fix it. There's clearly potential for there to be something. Fix it.
So let me put this out here as an idea, right? You say coaching diff. I want to take that a step farther, and I want to call this a management diff. Sorry, Gamer Rant. I'm gonna use the word diff. Anyway, I'm gonna call this a management diff, and here's why. So I'm looking at the Sparks roster. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 dudes playing for Spark right now. League minimum is 6. Way back at the start of the year, Overwatch 2 launched. Nobody knew what was going to happen. You know, like, we didn't know how many tanks you should have, if you should have role specialists, if you should have hero specialists, how big should everybody's hero pool be, yada, yada, yada. So I'm looking at the Sparks roster, and out of those 11 people, there are only 2 players who I don't remember having recent playtime. The only 2 out of 11 that I don't remember seeing on the bench recently are Neko on support and Architect on DPS. I do not have a lot of recollection of those 2 getting minutes this season. So what the Spark are left with are 9 players that all have small, limited hero pools and have not had an opportunity to build a lot of great chemistry with each other. I think the Spark are too big. I think that they were hard carried by Shy. I mean, like, put in a backpack and hiked for miles levels of hard carried by Shy. But because you have 4 other people who, like, yeah, they're playing with Shy this week, but they might ride the bench for 2 months afterwards, you can't build any sort of cohesion. You can't build any sort of hero pool. And I think that the Hangzhou Spark are the definitional example of going forward. You need players on your roster with large hero pools who play together regularly instead of having 1,000 people who you can plug in as needed.
Yeah. at the end of the day, something just needs to change. They need to get it together. I think it would benefit them to shrink their roster a little bit and really hone in on the members that they have. Because the solo carry is not gonna win you tournaments. It's just not.
Right. All right, last but not least, my final bullet, Dallas stomped everybody who got in their way, including the San Francisco Shock, and I don't want to say they got stomped.
Yeah, I was
going to
say that's I will not say that they stomped the Shock. I will say that experience won that game. Won that game.
Well, because, let's look. Okay, winners round 1, Dallas wins 3-1. Winners round 2, Dallas wins 3-1. Winners round 3, Dallas wins 3-0. Winners round 4, Dallas wins 3-1. Grand finals, Dallas goes to 7 maps against San Francisco.
Yeah.
This was the best grand finals game we have ever gotten in the Overwatch League by a mile.
Truly. And I think what's really crazy to me, what's really crazy to me, I had Dallas winning this after the first round. I said after the very first round, after I saw them play, I was like, this is their year, they're winning this. And even up until the grand finals, I had said they're going to beat the Shock. Once the Shock had won against Houston, I said there's a chance that Shock could pull this out, but I definitely think it's going to be Dallas. And I thought Dallas was going to beat the piss out of them. I really did. I honestly did. Watching Dallas play this entire week, I was shocked. I've never seen Overwatch played like this. Never before. And it was so impressive and so clean. And good Lord. I talked about this. I sent this to you days ago because I said I didn't want to forget this. Dallas are the prime example of what an APAC team could be, because they are a full Korean roster with no language barrier. They have the ability and the funding to scrim against teams in North America because they're the North American team. They are what APAC could be if APAC was integrated into the rest of the league and they weren't just scrimming against the same 8 teams repeatedly.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Dallas does not have a proper. Edison looked awesome. Sparkle looked awesome. Fearless is a great Winston. Fielder and Chio really pulled it all together. Dallas is a full, cohesive team, full of players at really high levels. The Shock, on the other hand, have maybe the player at the highest level in proper and a lot of other good players, but don't have that full team cohesion. And when it comes to big 7-game grand finals, I think full team cohesion means a lot more than having an all-star player.
And I think what it comes down to, like I said, this game, the grand finals were won by experience. You look at Dallas, they are all of them? Yeah, they're all veterans.
Yep.
But, they're all vets. They have all played in the Overwatch League before. Together. And most of the Shock are rookies. They brought in Striker, which now we know after a month and a half, I guess it's been since they made that move, was a contingency to prepare for grand finals. To take some of the pressure off of proper. And to their credit, it mostly worked. It did mostly work. But even still, having 3/5 of the team as rookies, it's just not quite, it doesn't measure up fully to the potential that Dallas had. I say Mikey's a rookie. He played for Boston before, but had I think a year off in contenders. But even Mikey, not playing at the same level as Fearless, and having already spoken about how important the Winston was to this composition. It was just it was not so much a full team difference. It was just like the Shock weren't fully there. They made big strides throughout the entire tournament to get to the point where they really put up a fight and almost had it in the bag. But there were just a couple, I don't even want to call them small mistakes. They were small mistakes in the grand scheme of things, but those small mistakes added up to just make the Dallas Fuel better enough to beat them. They were,
yeah,
and it really was. Those mistakes that were made fully felt like they came from positions of experience. You know, Dallas just were able to keep the level head a little bit more and keep this wild meta under just that much more control.
Yeah. And I pulled up the numbers because I was curious. The latest additions to the Dallas Fuel were Chio, Edison, and Gurio.
Yeah.
All three joined in October of 21. So, like, none of these guys were rookies, but they all came in last year and had a full season of playing together. If you want to see the difference in front of your eyes, go to the Dallas Fuel website roster page. Everybody's player image is wearing a Dallas Fuel jersey.
Yeah.
No other team has that.
Right.
Not a single one. So I think that you did say it in our Discord earlier. You said all that stuff about APAC, and you said this is Dallas's year, and they've been working for it. You know, they built this team. They have Sparkle and Edison, who have been in the team for a while. Like, they were really ready to win this year for sure.
Yeah, and like I said, I can't emphasize enough how big of an impact I think that the language barrier has here, because I found out during the grand finals that Violet is the shot caller for the Shock. Like, he is the IGL, which I didn't know. I've been very hard on Violet most of the year in regards to his play style. I think he's reckless, and I think he takes bad positions a lot of the time. But knowing that he does the IGL position for the team as well, like, it gives him a little bit more slack in my eyes, because he's now forced to take different positions, so he has a better awareness of what's going on. But even still, the Shock aren't a full Korean roster. They're still managing with mixed comms. Even if you try and tell Mikey and Kaluj the basics of Korean comms, there's still going to be things that get lost in translation that they have to make up for with awareness. Like, a team that has one language that they all understand fluently and cleanly, and understand how their comms work fully and cleanly, and can hear even minor nuances through the shitty microphones of those aviation headsets, like, that can't be understated. That's a big difference. Like, that is a very, very big difference that I don't think a lot of people keep track of, like, when they think about how these games are played out. So, you know, I do think that, like, Dallas did the smart thing a couple of years ago when they decided to go with a full Korean roster, and they built something that now has culminated into a grand finals win.
All right. Well, we've got to the end of this. I want to hear your final thoughts on playoffs overall. And I know you were wanting to talk about the Shock. If you got anything else to say, throw it on the table.
I'll start with the Shock because it's going to be relatively short. I think that Proper finds himself in a very, very strong position of power. And I don't know what kind of person he is. Judging by the look of him, he looks relatively harmless as a human being, which is fun. But like, I think he now sits in a position where he should try to pressure the Shock to recruit some help for him, so that he's not really the big hard carry, so that there is something else to help him succeed. Because to get the MVP, Rookie of the Year, and whatever the hell the other award he got was.
Roll Star? Yeah,
Roll Star. Like, to get a three-piece award and not win the grand final is kind of a bummer, and it speaks to the fact that he just didn't have the full support that he needed from his team. It's kind of a similar, very different, but not fully dissimilar to the Spark situation. So, I think this is now the Shock's time to take what they've learned from this and to get a main tank in order, to get some extra flexibility on the support role. I genuinely don't think that the damage is the problem. I don't. I really don't. I think they have enough damage players. I think they have enough to sort it out. Sam be damned. Like they have enough damage to get what they need. They now need to take it upon the rest of the roles and sort out the weaknesses, even if it's just coaching the hell out of Mikey into getting his aggression managed properly. They just need to find some way to get some help to where that team can now take what they've got from this season and win a frickin' third championship next year, or at least some tournaments next year. Like they're now no longer rookies. Now it's time to ante up and get it sorted. So
no, ante up is Houston's thing.
Whatever. They didn't make it to grand finals. It's the Shocks now.
Sure.
So that's enough about the Shock. Like I said, proper, well-deserved for every award that he got this year. So now do something with him, or he'll go to a team that has the resources to get him that championship win. So, keep that in mind too. As far as the grand finals as a whole, this whole tournament, best Overwatch I think we've ever seen performed at the pro level. Full stop. I think that is the best Overwatch we have witnessed. One of the most exciting metas to watch. One of the, across the board, just good games all around generally. Some disappointments, but the vast majority, really good games played across the board. I want to see more now.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I have had a great time this year. I think Overwatch League's first year on Overwatch 2 was a massive success. I think these were the best playoffs that we've ever had. It was great to be back at LAN. I hope we get more LAN events next year. Obviously, all of those things.
Yes.
I agree wholeheartedly on Proper. I view Proper as, like the Sidney Crosby, the LeBron James.
Yes.
This guy is an icon of the league, and I hope that San Francisco benefits from that. I hope that Proper individually benefits from that. I hope that the league can use Proper in a way that the league benefits from his ability and also doesn't burn Proper to a crisp.
Yes.
And give him horrid mental health issues as the league is wont to do. And I hope the best for him going forward. Honestly, I feel like a lot of years I come out of playoffs thinking, all right, well, these 5 teams really need to restructure. And I don't feel that way this year. There are certainly a couple teams that I think need some serious help. My biggest one would be Atlanta. I think Atlanta needs to rework their roster in a serious way. But my feelings on the future of Florida, Houston, London are all really good and better than I expected them to be on the other side of this. Even Toronto, who I don't think had a great showing, I don't think is in a world of hurt. I think that this was a really competitive grand finals, and it was not a blowout at the end as it has been in other years. It's just it's a good year for Overwatch League. Thank God. We needed one. We needed one desperately.
Yes. And now it's time to ride that momentum. Ride that momentum. Raggy. Ride that momentum and do something. And this is the onus is on Blizzard and the league now. Do something with the momentum. Make sure that this stays up so that next year the money is flowing for these teams to do more, for us to get bigger LAN events, to get back to sort of the glory days of the Overwatch League, the storied glory days as they were.
Yeah, totally agree. Well, that's all I got. You have anything else?
I think we can put a bow on that.
Well, then let's put a bow on it. That will do it for this episode of Spectator Diff. Again, please subscribe to us here on YouTube, or if you're listening to the audio of our show, subscribe on your podcast app of choice. You can follow me on socials at MC @LastCall_DJ_MC, and maybe not on Twitter for much longer. We'll see.
LOL. And me on socials @LastCall_Gaming.
And until next time, just remember, diff isn't a bad word. We are the spectator difference, and we're better at watching Overwatch than you. Especially you, GamerRant.com.
GG's, everybody.
Except GamerRant.